Today we're going to run through the progressions towards the freestanding handstand push-up. Now I'm going to do this a little bit different today. I'm just going to cover the low P-bar versions. Now these are more or less exactly the same as the floor version. However, they're slightly different in terms of the way you rebalance and also the depth. So if you've got bars that are very close to the floor, you're still working a little bit more of a deficit. So your head's actually going to go below your hands compared to the floor version. But more or less things are roughly the same. But let's go through them. We're going to go right beginner level to start with. So starting with the push-up. Now with the push-up, think of these like these earlier progressions. So say you're in the middle somewhere in terms of the current progression, just go through these, one, to check that you can do them, but two, use them as your warm-up. So just bang out a few repetitions, slowly work through each of them until you get to the progression you're on. And then roughly be working around 5 sets of 5 repetitions. So our normal strength sets and reps. But remember, this is skill dependent, so time under tension, quality of movement, and understanding the balance of mobility, strength, and handstand balance is really important, and work on your weak links, fill in all the gaps. So push-ups, we can go nice and deep on the P-bars. Now, if you don't have toe push-ups very easily, then do them on the knees. Just make sure that the eccentric is very, very clean. So there's a good line between your feet all the way up to your shoulders, or if you're doing them on the knees, make sure there's a good one segment from the knees all the way to the shoulders. Go in nice and deep, hold for a couple of seconds and push back up pretty fast. So slow down, little hold, back up is a good way to go on all of these movements. Then we're going to progress to the pike push-ups. Now, as soon as we get into pike push-up and hair onwards, think that we're trying to mimic the pathway of the actual handstand push-up. So we want to be strict in terms of the angle of the torso as you come down. So we want to create that triangle between the head and the hands. And then as you come back up, position yourself back so hands, shoulders, hips and feet are more or less stacked. Now the position and the setup of the pike push-up is going to be a little bit dependent on your limb length, your flexibility and your strength. Ideally, like I say, we should be trying to mimic the pathway of the actual handstand push-up, but if you're not so strong, you might find that the position's a bit flatter. Normal rule though, eccentrics are going to be easier than concentrics, so try and be stricter on the eccentric because you should have a little bit more strength, and if you need to make it a little bit flatter as you come up with a concentric, that's fine, but then over time try and make it as clean as possible. Standard version is seen as having the hands and feet on the floor. Then we can raise the feet and we can raise the hands. Now obviously when we raise the hands more, you go into a deficit. Because we're talking about low P-bars, we're going to keep the bars the same height throughout and then just increase the intensity by raising the feet up. We can elevate one foot as well, and as best you can when you elevate the leg, we want to try and have that in line with the torso. You have that one segment from the foot all the way down to the head, but it is tricky keeping one foot on the floor and working out angles and things, and with your flexibility it's all going to change it. Now the next 4, so we have the chest to wall, the back to wall, the freestanding and the croda handstand, are all going to be slightly different in terms of progressions, in terms of what you find easier. You might find back to wall or chest to wall easier than each other. You might actually find freestanding easier if you have good balance already. But normally it would be seen as going chest to wall, then back to wall, freestanding, and croda handstand comes in the middle there somewhere. Croda handstand is definitely easier for most people than a freestanding strict handstand push-up, but that's the one that mainly floats around. Now with the chest to wall, the back to wall, and the freestanding, we basically have the same progressions. We have clean eccentrics, so the down only, starting in a handstand position. Now even if you're doing chest to wall or back to wall, it could be freestanding off the wall and then we only use the wall as we go up and down. But that just wants to be your best possible position where you can hold an efficient handstand hold. Now partial range, you can just really go on feel or you can use a target. I'm a big fan of using a target along the way. You don't have to use it for every rep and set, but it's a great way of progressing to trying to reach that next target, or just measuring your current level and know what the next level is. A yoga block works really well because you have it up on its end, you can turn it sideways and you can turn it on that third lowest height. And then we have the full range of motion, so going all the way down so head touches the floor and back up again. So chest to wall is a little bit easier to keep a nice body line position. The only thing that can happen with the chest to wall is that your body starts to collapse. So as you come down in a positive position, you try and push back up and you arch and dish into that position and sink. If you just try and keep super strict on the eccentric, so as you come down, if you do sink or buckle a little bit on the way back up, it's not so bad. But if you buckle on the way down and then buckle on the way up, on top of that, the dip is probably going to be too much and you're going to find it really hard to get out of that sunken position. Now when your chest to wall is a little bit easier to walk your feet back up the wall instead of sliding. If you've got a nice flat surface and socks on, you can slide quite easily, but any other wall surface, especially bricks, you're probably going to have to walk back up. But as long as you keep that positive position and don't collapse, it's not bad. Then we have the back to wall. I never used to like the back to wall, but I'm starting to use that more and more. I think it's really good to carry over to the freestanding. And I like the version where we bend one leg. That allows you to keep the straight leg in line with the torso. So as you go up and down, or if you're doing the eccentrics, the partial range or the full range, it's exactly the same. We're trying to mimic the pathway of the freestanding handstand push-up with that leg that's off the wall. You know, you have to sort of read the overbalance, underbalance here. Underbalance is just going to take you off the wall when you're going to fall back down to your feet, where too much overbalance is going to put too much against the wall. And just make sure with all of these that you really work on hitting that triangle at the bottom. So your head's going to come forwards and create the triangle between the hands and the head. Let's next talk about the Croda handstand. Now the Croda handstand can have eccentrics, it can have concentrics, sort of partial range as well, depending on how deep you make the movement. But we really want to get very good at that seesaw. So head and shoulders come down, hips come up. So even if you're just using a little bit of a push and come up a little bit off the legs, I'd call that partial range. So you're sort of coming up a little bit, coming back down, getting used to transferring all the weight to the arms, the shoulders, and the upper back, and trying to decrease as much weight and energy from the legs. So when you place your hands down on the floor, bend the elbows, all your weight's there like a pike push-up, and you step the knees very lightly on your arms, and that way it's going to be much easier when you try and transition, take the knees off the arms and push up towards the handstand. Now you can be done back to wall and chest to wall. The chest to wall allows you to walk down the wall further into the crow. It's a really good one, but it can result in way too much weight against the wall and make more of a sideways movement, where we want this to be as inverted as we can. So the energy is going up on top of the base, and then as you come down, it's stacked on top of the base until you get right down into that crow position. And then we have the freestanding. Now with the freestanding, it's going to be really good if you've got very good balance, not just in the hold at the top, in the bottom of the movement, so be able to hold that bottom position with your head kissing the floor for time, so you can change direction there. You can also play around with your angle in the bottom, so if you take your head towards your arms, it's going to make the steeper angle, and if you take your head away from your hands, it's going to make more of a shallow, more inclined position. So being able to control that and use that to your advantage is very powerful, and just basically have room for error at every degree throughout the pathway of the full range of motion. That means if you get a bit stuck, or you lose balance, or you have a sticking point in your strength, you can hang out there for a few seconds, compose yourself, and then put your body slightly over balanced, maybe to help you out, so you can just push and scoop yourself out of the handstand push-up. But balance is everything on that, so super slow eccentrics, playing with partial range at different height, not just for strength, but also to hit those balance ranges, and then eventually doing the full range of motion. So I'm a big fan of doing handstand push-ups on the floor, on bars, on canes, on boxes, on the side of walls, and everything in between. So maybe you have a floor handstand push-up. I highly recommend that you work it on P-bars and try and bring the hands up higher and higher, work to a full deficit. And that's going to put you in a really good place to work towards things like 90-degree handstand push-ups. But also the cool thing is, if you're more at the beginner level of these, work your pike push-ups, work your dips, work your standard push-ups, and that's just going to create a really good base. And if you're working on your freestanding handstand at the same time, as your strength increases, your balance is going to get better and better. They're going to come together at the right time to unlock the full skill. Let me know if you have any questions with this one down in the comments. Thumbs up and subscribe, be appreciated. I'll speak to you in the next one.